Greetings. I wanted to talk about those who have never heard the gospel, as we learned about in lecture number 13. Now, my view on this has changed as I've gotten older. The denomination that I was raised in, I feel like we talked about this in a way that was a little bit um, in error as far as scripture goes. I remember learning about the people who came before Jesus, and in error, I learned about a scripture in First Peter um, 3 and 19, which says, or starting in 18, for Christ also suffered once for sin, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which he went and proclaimed the spirits in prison, because they formerly did not obey, when God's patience waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared. So that was some kind of supposed to show that those who came before Jesus, they didn't necessarily follow him, but he went and preached to them while he was in the tomb. And I don't know where that was even drawn from, but that was kind of like understood, and it kind of made us all feel better that, well, maybe those who have never heard the gospel, there is hope for them because Jesus will appear to them even in modern day. I heard stories of people who would say that, well, maybe Jesus himself will appear before these tribes in the darkest regions of the world, the most lost regions. And that's just really, I learned that that's just kind of a cop out for people who don't want to go and share the gospel. It's kind of passing that off, kind of passing the buck. But like we saw in the lecture in Romans 2, Paul writes there, therefore you have no excuse, O man, every one of you who judges, for in passing judgment on one another, you condemn yourself, because you, the judge, practice the very same things. But that's going in light of how God has revealed himself. Earlier we see in chapter 1, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness, and the unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. I don't have this positive, hopeful view of humanity that there are those out there that are just in and of themselves good people worthy of God's salvation because they obeyed and they did what they thought was right. Because if you see in Ephesians 2, verse 1 starts with, you were dead in your trespasses and sin, which you once walked, following the course of this world. Now, obviously, the course of the world is not to walk in light and to want to live in truth, but to be walking in sin and death. And I think there's an implication in saying that people can follow all the rules or they can do everything right. It's the same as saying that dead men can walk or come back to life without any intervention from the outside. And that's just, that's the idea of people being able to simply obey or not need God's salvation is as ridiculous as saying that the dead can come back to life apart from Jesus. So, before I really studied it, I think I fell into that category of just kind of having that cop-out idea that someone else will take care of it. But when I seriously started considering and was feeling called into international missions, uh, God opened up to me several scriptures like the ones that I'd read that say uh, people need to hear the gospel, and uh, how will how will they be saved if they don't hear the gospel? And he gave that to us that we can share that, not as like a burden or something that we should worry about, although it should sometimes bother us that people don't know the gospel. That should maybe motivate us a little bit more. But yeah, that's just that's kind of where I've come from.